On this episode of Faking It, I interview composer, producer, and all-around swell guy, Adrian Ellis. If you're just joining us, Faking It is a podcast based on the notion that we're all just getting through life, experience by experience, faking it till we make it. So here we go. So welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for coming on, Adrian.
Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. It's a bit of an odd situation, I will say right off the bat, to be talking to a person of your caliber about faking it. So I look at your success and I think about everything that I know you've as much as I do know that you've accomplished. I bet we'll learn a lot more today. But and I wonder how you may see that theory or that like philosophy of faking it through life, and how has that kind of happened for you on your side of things?
I don't know, when you called me, I was sort of wondering if that would happen. And I was like, I feel like I'm the perfect candidate for it because I really do feel like I'm faking it and making it up as I go along. And it's always a perspective thing, right? Like everyone sort of looks at where they are and they don't see the forest for the trees. So everyone else thinks, oh my God, you're at this high place and you're so far in your career and everything. And I'm just going, no way. Like, I'm just starting out. I've barely seen anything yet. And, if you think that I've got a handle on what's going on, there's maybe a bit of strategy at play, but for the most part, you're just sort of taking it day by day. And definitely the whole idea of faking it is absolutely applied all the time.
Yeah, so you work in a lot of music, a lot of you're scoring a lot of film and some web series and some TV. So where does that kind of come from? Did you come from like a classical kind of background? I know you play a lot of instruments. I'm just wondering, like how has that education wise, how does that fit into your life? A lot of people we've had on, myself included, like we do some things that we don't necessarily have classical education in. So where does that sort of fit in with you?
So I grew up in a musical household. When I was very young, we moved to Germany because my father found work as an orchestra musician.
Okay.
So that's where I spent the first 8 years of my life. So really I was around my parents who were both classically trained musicians, practicing, going to rehearsals, seeing the opera, just being exposed to it constantly. But that's not really the thing that I twigged onto. I was always really interested in visual art. I wanted to be, an illustrator, and I would paint and draw. And if you ever saw, like as a kid, basically from as early as I could hold a pencil until my early 20s, if you ever saw me, I was most likely drawing or painting. And
cool. That's another facet.
That's what I went to post-secondary for. I actually was intending on being a professional illustrator, and that's what I had my sights set on. But all the while, music was something I was always doing as well. And after I finished post-secondary, I moved to Vancouver from Edmonton. And that's where, the band that I was in at the time, we sort of spent some time out there and then eventually moved to Toronto, it was music that brought me to Toronto. After that, once the band broke up, which is other than making music, the second best thing that bands do is break up. I just sort of was thinking about what am I doing with myself, and I started a graphic design company for a while, and I absolutely hated every second of it.
Oh, wow. Why did you hate it? If it's something you came from to create it, what was the loathing part? Was it too commercial, or what was your hate?
I don't know. It was really weird. It's like I can draw parallels between the kind of problem solving that I do in music and the kinds of things, the challenges I come up with or up against when I'm doing a score or producing someone's music. There are direct parallels between the two of them, between being a graphic designer or graphic artist. But for some reason, the problem solving process just drove me crazy. When things didn't work or there was something that hindered the process or slowed me down, I just couldn't stand it. And I didn't really love the end result or the clients I was working with either.
Oh, okay.
So that kind of fell apart. So I did some, I sort of went back to the drawing board. I was working at Ryerson at the time and trying to figure out what it was that I wanted to do. And I just sort of did some, looking at what the different avenues I could explore. And once I sort of, it's really silly. I feel like I'm such a late bloomer in so many ways. But one of them was just like, how did I miss this the entire time? Because it's the perfect intersection between everything that I love, which is storytelling, visual art, and music.
Right.
And that's scoring for picture. And that is something I absolutely adore.
That's awesome. So were you playing multiple instruments before that kind of came to you, or were you sort of like, I have this once kind of staple instrument that I play, but then you got into sort of making your own music because it was something that you're going to do for a living?
For me, it all started with a love of guitar and guitar players and guitar playing. And that's what I sort of, I had the rock star dreams, of course. And when we were in a band, that's what we're sort of dreaming, is touring the world and being super famous and all that crap. So that's really where it started for me. I took violin lessons and piano lessons through my parents, which, of course, that never goes well. Whenever your parents trying to teach you something, it's a zero-sum game. So that's where it started for me. So I was a guitar player first, but what I'd always really been interested in was producing, like any elements of like how sound was created or recording. So I worked with I started on tape decks and just doing overdubs by putting the tape that you just recorded into a different player and then recording yourself playing along with that tape and then switching it back and forth until you build up layers and layers of music. So that kind of thing was of interest to me, and just how to create neat sounds and how to do sound design and sound sculpting. That was also something that was really interesting to me. And all the time I was always writing and creating music. I was always embarrassed when people said, "Oh, you play guitar? Can you play this song?" And I'd be like, "No." Can you play that song? No. Can you play Stairway to Heaven? No. I'd be like, I write my own stuff for myself. Like, this is what interests me. I'm not interested in learning other people's repertoire. So my repertoire has always been terrible.
Oh, I have the same problem. I like to make my own things up, and everybody wants to sit around a campfire and sing, all these pop hits, and I don't know how to play any of them. Yeah. So I totally get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. So after you kind of figured out where you were going with I guess in a way you figured out where you were going by other things ending. So the graphic design ending a little bit, and then you had, the band end. But did you go to formal school for music, or like afterwards, or for recording, or for any of those kinds of things? Or were you just immersed in it sort of with your parents, so you kind of knew the basics and took it on from there?
I think in terms of music, like writing music and music creation, that was a sort of innate thing just by having been around it growing up and hearing it all the time. It just sort of becomes part of your cellular makeup, I guess. In terms of like formal education, I did study classical guitar for a number of years and rock guitar. But I mean, in terms of the orchestration, in terms of writing music, and in terms of production, that's all, I would say, self-taught. Like I would go and seek out ways of learning, or it was really mostly just by exploring and trying and just being so obsessed by it that I just kept working and working. As far as like in the early 2000s when digital recording technology was much more easily affordable, and you could set up a studio for like, $1,000 to record your stuff at home and to, have the sort of rudimentary basis for making music of all kinds. That was the big tipping point for me, because then I just dove right into that and just pounded away at it.
Yeah, right on. And then, so what was your, like, you're obviously right now a very successful composer, but right back to starting, what was like your first project that you would have composed or gone forward to produce some music for?
So once I decided that this was the path I was going to take, I wrote a bunch of music just to sort of like try and cover the basis initially of what I thought filmmakers might want and what they might be looking for their productions. And I mean, looking back on that stuff, is a very naive kind of approach, which I think obviously everyone starting out is going to sort of take the same tack more or less, is like imagining your music.
Why would you say it was naive?
Well, it's just the music. I think when you listen to it, you're like, it's very inward focused, right? Like, I mean, nowadays, most of my work, or most of what I consider important about the specific type of work I do, is not musical, right? It's analyzing story. It's analyzing literary form. It's figuring out what role the music has to play. It's not about what you're writing or what you're going to get into. It's about how that fits into a bigger scope of a project and the needs of the filmmaker and the needs of the film, right? So, and everyone starts there. You always start inwardly focused, and you're like, this is what interests me, and this is the thing I think is cool, right? So I was just writing music I thought sounded cool, which there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, that's just the way everyone starts, right? But then I thought, I thought, well, I got to start working on stuff. So I wrote a list, and it was a very short list because I was still pretty new to Toronto, and I didn't know a lot of people, and I certainly didn't know anyone in filmmaking, really. But I knew a few people, and I knew Jason Lever because he shot a music video with another friend of ours, Sean Willings. So I was like, I'm going to get in touch with Sean and see what they're working on, get in touch with Jason. And we ended up working on a couple of like film one of those 24-hour film challenges together.
Oh, right on. Yeah, I've done one of those. Those are good fun. So you compose something in record time then.
Exactly. So it was just like, and it just thrown into the deep end, but with a bunch of other people who are learning basically the craft as we went along. So it was really great just to get started. And I think that's the one thing, when I see some other composers coming up, they tend to be very isolated and just sort of sit in their studios and focus on writing music as opposed to getting out there and becoming part of a team. And I was just really interested in the whole process. So I'd be on the set, I'd act in stuff. I was just always wanted to be around and figure out how everything worked and learn every aspect of what they were doing because it just storytelling really interested me. And of course, there's the whole visual aspect to it too,
Right. Yeah.
So that's where it all started. I just threw myself into there and then went and found student filmmakers at Ryerson where I was working and worked on basically everything I could get my hands on.
What were you doing at Ryerson? So obviously that was sort of your daytime job that's keeping things going like afloat. And then you started doing your passion on the side. Is that kind of how things began?
Yeah, so I was working at the front desk at continuing education, basically, as a glorified secretary or first response call person,
Right,
talking to students about what courses they need to take during the summer or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I would do that 9 to 5, 7 days a week or 5 days a week, and then I'd go home and write music till 3 a.m.
That's awesome.
And I did that for I did that for 7 years. I basically did the composing thing on the side of a full-time job because my temperament is not such that I don't do well with not knowing where the money's coming in and having that kind of risk and just sort of sitting there going, I can deal with it better now. Obviously, that's sort of the day-to-day is not really knowing when anything's going to happen. But
Yeah.
I've structured my finances now so that there's a certain continuity. But back then, the idea of like jumping into it full time or even part time was like, no, I've got to.
Yeah, pretty freaky. So. That's something that not a lot of artists, I don't think, actually talk about enough. And I think that I'm totally from that end of things as well, trying to make sure I have that set number coming in, and I know there's
Mm-hmm.
that living standard, and there's that. So like you're saying, prepared financially for either you're making that money during the day some other way, and you're kicking ass at your passion and your art and in the wee hours, and that's how you do it, or like that's the most comfortable way that I know how to function, and it takes a whole lot more effort, but I think slowly but surely you can do what you've done, where day job becomes less and less of a staple and becomes more of either it's gone or it's a little bit of a thing on the side. It's not 40 hours, maybe it's something less. So that's, pretty important to talk about. But did you find that like you had balance in your life, like with were you feeling fulfilled with having that kind of day job, or were you resenting it the whole time?
Oh, I mean, let's put it this way. I felt fortunate to have the job, and it was a very good job, all things told, and it certainly was good money and great benefits and everything. I mean, for what we were doing, it was great. I still didn't want to be doing it.
Yeah.
Obviously. But you know what? The one thing looking back now and where I'm doing music or a music related like freelance business, like that's all I do. There's this kind of like looking back on those days. One thing I say to people now is if you're in that position, you really got to enjoy that because there's something really wonderful about those times. When you get home from your day job, you're never more excited to get into the work that you really want to be doing.
Right.
Once you've been doing that kind of work on a full-time basis for a while, the honeymoon period, it does wane a little
Definitely.
bit. And you definitely get that back when you jump into the right projects and you're in part of a great collaborative team and you're working on something you're really excited about. Then you get that juice again. But there is an element to like working on your creative passion full time. I'm not saying at all in any way that I don't absolutely love every moment of it and it's fantastic. But for anyone that's still doing that slog, like trying to make ends meet and do their stuff on the side and wishes, oh man, I can't wait till I can transfer and do this full time. Don't forget to really stop and smell the roses and that passion and excitement you have for those moments when you get to work on that stuff. because that's special.
Yeah, it definitely is special because you're right. And like anything else, you get into it, and sometimes you can go, "Oh man, this is killing me more than I thought that it ever would." Because it's always you want what you don't have in that moment, and then you get to it and you go, "Oh wow, this isn't as glamorous as I thought it would be." And that was sort of something a full-time musician we spoke to, or somebody who was working full-time somewhere and then quit everything and went like 100% into playing guitar and like doing his gigs and everything all around the city. And he finally got there and was thought, oh wow, I've made it at this point. And then, realized that like sometimes he's like, well shit, I don't want to go out tonight, but if I don't go out tonight, I can't buy food. So it becomes like this really intense survival, which we do learn so much from. But then it also becomes maybe it's a little bit of a suck on our souls. We want to be doing well enough, and so you're right. You got to definitely live in those moments for sure. So what's the I guess was Webseries sort of where you really got going? I know that's where I met you. I met you through Out with Dad. So we've had Lindsay Middleton on a couple our last episode, and we've had Jason Lever on, creator of Out with Dad. And I'm just wondering, like, I'm wondering actually where I came into where we met, where you were in your career. So was Webseries sort of like a big jump off point for you, or were you doing a lot before then?
It's like the way that things sort of worked out for me is that I managed to land a few gigs that were sort of bigger TV gigs, namely through CTV which is now Bell Media, working on things like Daily Planet, and just a couple of really big theme gigs that not only paid fairly well up front and allowed me to sort of put a bit of a nest egg away so that I could make the transfer into full-time composing, but also, started that flow of back-end, royalties that are the sort of holy grail for any kind of creative person.
Oh, yeah.
So that allows and continues to allow me to choose. It's kind of what everyone calls their fuck off money, right? It's like I can choose what I want to work on, and I can take, more creative gigs that may not have that kind of cash or that kind of budget that, that they're just not where, a full-time professional composer might need someone to be in terms of being able to say, I can take 3 weeks to do this.
Yeah.
And work full-time on that, right? So that's one aspect of it.
Right.
In terms of the creative stuff in the community, and probably to a large degree also like notoriety and credibility abroad. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that in 2009, when Out with Dad was sort of really getting started, that was a big shift for us when that thing took off, because it's that magic Goldilocks zone where we just hit a niche market that was absolutely starving for content.
Yeah.
And it's been a wonderful ride, absolutely. And I think every web series I've been involved with, it's a great, it's always a wonderful combination of creative freedom and being part of a very open, collaborative team, where it's always a mix of people who are pretty pro, but are also completely open to doing things a different way. So you're not getting into this kind of like very regimented, very people like systems like big TV where people just this is the way you do it. The director directs the show. There's a showrunner, and then you as a composer only get to talk to the producers, and maybe there's multiple ones. There's show notes, and there's no real like interaction between the different departments. Whereas in web series, it's just anything goes, which is an amazing place to be, and certainly a burgeoning industry of creative collaboration.
Yeah, it totally is. And I think recently I just saw you were awarded a Holly Webb Award, which was for Asset, Jonathan Robbins' series. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, that was a wonderful Monday surprise.
Yeah, well, congratulations on that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a little bit about what you're talking about, notoriety abroad. It like the web series scenario has taken a lot of the people in the community so many places.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, where has it kind of taken you in terms of like shows and award shows and awards and different things like that through all of the many that you've worked on?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've been in New York for the Indie Series Awards. We were in LA for that when they switched over to doing it in Los Angeles, and of course the Holly Webb Awards. and LA Web Fest and all those kinds of things. So, you know, it's a great excuse to get out there and to sort of meet people from all around the world, which is always probably one of the most enjoyable things, is to see that, and then just to meet people from all over the world who know what you're doing and you're aware of their work, and that kind of that spirit where everyone's sort of in the same mode of just, you know, making the thing that they're really passionate about.
Yeah. So when you look back on the big kinds of things that happened career wise, so commercially, the things you're talking about that were able to provide some security for you long term, and the ability to choose and pick and choose what you want to do. What do you think were important elements working up to scoring those gigs? Like, as for people who might be listening who are thinking like, well, I'm slogging along here, I don't really know what the hell I'm doing, but you know, what kind of important things might have been the catalyst to those big like wins for you?
Number one, giving back before you receive. So absolutely, the first thing I would say is that probably like most of my successes in that area are because I was out there, and I was basically like, it was just volunteerism. It's just like getting in there and wherever I could, saying, how can I help? What can I do for you guys? And not in like, how can I give music away, or like, let me score something for free, but like, do you want me to schlep beer for this recording session? Do you want me to go order pizza? And do you want me to like set up chairs and be part of this or that? You know, it was always just like my being involved, especially with the Screen Composers Guild of Canada, which has been, you know, I would say a huge indirect source or reason for my success with their internship program, and then all the volunteer hours that I put in with them over the years. That's absolutely the number one thing. You're just going out there, and if you can go and be valuable, right, as opposed to being someone who has their hands out and is sort of looking for alms for the poor, and please give me a chance. You don't say that. You never say, give me a chance. You say, what can I do for you right now? You know, what value can I bring to this? And it oftentimes has nothing to do with what it is that you're actually looking to do, right? Like the whole CTV thing with Daily Planet, which was the first big, like, huge breaking through point for me, which really just changed a lot of things for me, was if I draw the direct line, I started volunteering with the Guild. I showed up for absolutely everything. I did menial tasks and just kept showing up. And I was at those recording sessions. And one of the engineers that was running the orchestral reading session at that time noticed that I just kept showing up and kept, doing all this stuff without asking for anything. And then he liked my music too, and he threw my name in the hat without me even knowing. So one day I got this email message, which was a request for proposal from CTV for Daily Planet main theme. And I was like, oh my God, how did this happen? You know? So that's the thing. And again, in a networking situation too, if you go out there and you're just looking for something all the time, or you just want someone to give you a chance, even if it's for free, that's a very low value kind of thing, right? Like, most people aren't looking for that. But if you can figure out some other way to be valuable or to offer something to people, that's going to put you in a completely different position.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Giving back, I find, is so important too, as well in the artistic community, but in any way in life. I always try to put emphasis on enriching some situation. So if you walk in there going, like, I'm going to try to make this either the best that it could be, or help this person out, or pay a solid to somebody who's, just starting out, or, there's those small little things that I think, they just enrich your life to give those, and other people's life to receive them. So I think that's
exactly right. That's the key. Is it's not like you're going through with a kind of bitter resentment about having to do that. It's that it actually makes your life better. You feel great about it, or at least you should, right? Like, you should approach those things with a kind of like, real joy about it. I remember one time at TIFF, I ran into this woman that was looking for a co-production, or a co-producer from Germany. So we were sort of, doing the whole circuit. Like, at the end of the day, the industry is typically like, well, who knows where a party is? And she's like, well, I'm going to the German party. And, I was just sort of in the mode of just like, whatever party, we're just going to go, I'll get in. It doesn't matter. We'll figure something out. And I said to her, look, so who are you looking for? Like, what kind of show is it? And just give me a little bit of a pitch so I know what it is you're looking for. And she gave me the pitch, and I said, okay, that's really cool. Let me try and find a producer for you. So I just spent the rest of the evening not pitching myself to anybody, but saying, hey, I've got someone I think you need to meet. She's got this great project. You're a producer from Germany. And of course, I speak German, so there's kind of that in. And that was just fun. It was great fun, and it allowed me to have a conversation. And of course, once in a while, they'd say, well, what's your thing in all this? I'm like, I'm just helping out a friend, but I'm a composer too. And they're like, oh, that's cool. So those conversations then turn, and, but even if it doesn't, it's a different way to sort of operate, which I think has been one of the keys to not only my success, but also just being happy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I see here too on your website, in a way, I feel like this is another element of giving back and enriching people's situations. I see that you've produced, or at least you're a part of, something called Inside the Score.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, Inside the Score was something I developed as a sort of way of producing case studies for the projects that I worked on that I thought were kind of interesting or that had a neat angle to them. And as a way of sort of I just having something that is that's a conversation starter for filmmakers that may not know or be aware of certain aspects of the compositional process, or more specifically, like how you tell stories with music, right?
Right.
So that's the whole basis. They're really short, little 2-minute to 5-minute things where I just talk about one or two elements of the approach to how music might work in a scene, or different approaches to music or storytelling, and those kinds of things.
Yeah, right on. So that's cool. Everybody, I'll put a link on the show notes about how to find Inside the Score. There's a couple videos here on Adrian's website, so we'll make sure to link that up for everybody if you're curious. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about how certain things in our lives, we come across different elements and then they relate later how you may never expect that they would relate. So in that, I know that you're a martial artist. You've had karate in your life. Is that correct? You're a black belt in karate?
Yeah, 3rd degree black belt.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've got karate in your life. And is that something that you did early on?
Yeah, I started with martial arts when I was in my teens, and I started with Taekwondo. And then for a few years, it sort of fell off while I was in college, and then I started picking it up around 2001. I did it pretty solidly for like about 15 years, working up to earning my 3rd degree black belt. Yeah.
All right. Well, I have a bit of what does a 3rd degree black belt mean?
Oh, it's once. So I mean, to be honest, the whole grading system is kind of it's just a way of sort of like, it's the color system and all that is much more for North Americans. Like in Japan, there's either a white belt and then there's a black belt. And the reason why you wear a black belt is just to differentiate the rank between student and teacher. They don't in Japanese culture, it's not really so much of a need to say, well, I've progressed, I need something to show that. Whereas,
I see.
In North America, we like we like to get little
nods and pats, yeah.
Exactly. We want something that is tangible, like an award or something. That's saying, yeah, you did.
Yeah, your participation award certainly isn't a Japanese ideal.
Exactly. So 3rd degree just means it's a way of it's a level within the black belt. So to me, black belt. Once you get that, once you earn that, that means you have basically mastered the basics. To me, it's like getting a bachelor degree.
Okay. Right?
It's about the equivalent of that. So you've got you're not a master. You're not like this super ninja or anything. You're just ready to really start the deeper path towards mastery.
Right.
Right. Which never really ends. But yeah, so then you're just getting, those are little wayposts along the way.
Yes, and in that you have this 3rd degree black belt. You've actually been in the Webseries community for a bit, mostly composing, and then you end up choreographing for Haphead, which is a very successful web series. And what was that like? So that you played a character in that the web series, and you also ended up doing all of the martial arts choreography for it. So once again, you kind of went in there, and like, you wouldn't be faking that because you obviously know the martial art of things. But like, did you ever choreograph anything before?
I was interested in it for a long time, and I mean, to be honest with you, knowing martial arts and doing fight choreography, they're not related really much at all. I mean,
You're right.
Obviously, to be a choreographer, you have to know martial arts.
Yes.
But in order to be a successful choreographer, it's a totally different game.
Yeah, it's very showy and very like theatrical.
It's the antithesis of how you'd really want to operate if you're doing, traditional martial arts.
Right.
So, you know what? This is sort of an example of the whole faking it thing for me, because I like to put myself in situations that are sort of like these moments of terror. where I'm like, I really have no business doing this. I know that I don't have really the goods. I don't have any experience, but I want to do this anyways. Like there was a time when I was I play drums now on a regular, but when I was sort of starting out a few years back, I managed to convince the band leader that was putting together a show for sort of a Soul Train review. And he asked me to come back because I played with him before as a guitar player, which of course is my milieu. But I said, I'm interested in coming back, but I want to play drums. And he's like, okay. And I'm like, great. Okay, then I'm in. And it was like, I mean, if I look back on it now, I really had no business doing that. And it was definitely a very steep learning curve with some very bumpy roads and some, where you sort of just terrify yourself into some sort of competence.
Right.
And the same thing was, I've done that on numerous occasions where I just pick something I want to do and go, okay, I'm going to put myself in a position where there's no out. Like I can't back out now because my reputation and people are depending on me to come through with this. And it was the same thing for Haphead, where I said, sure, I'll do it. And I sort of had to figure out how the hell am I going to get this done, So definitely a huge learning process. But everyone on that show was so great. And
it looked fantastic.
They're all learning too, right? So I mean, they're learning how to shoot fight choreography. They're learning how to deal with that whole aspect of something which they'd never done before. So it was a lot of fun. But yeah, definitely one of those moments where I'm going, okay, let's just get this done. Let's figure out a way to make this happen.
Yeah, that's very cool. That sounded like a real fun time. It was a great segment and really cool to see you guys all doing that choreography. And you were like a villain in it too.
That's all. That was probably the most fun. I did do some acting. I actually was, oddly enough, if you go back to my high school yearbook, that's what I'm known for. So I'm like a chameleon. It's like I just never settled into one thing until I found this like whole screen composing thing. But yeah, if you look at my yearbook, it says one of Strathcona's prominent actors. I'm like, well, that's weird. 'Cause that's not really what I would have said I was doing. But there you go. Yeah, but playing a villain, which is not something I ever got to do before, was because it's so like counter to my personality.
Yeah, it's very very separate from who you are.
Yeah. That was very fun.
Yeah, very cool. So what kind of projects are coming up, or what's like the ultimate situation for you right now? Are you looking to do more of, strictly this well, not strictly, because I don't think you're really that kind of person to pigeonhole yourself, but are you what are your interests in right now? What kind of composing are you doing or most interested in doing?
Really runs the gamut, but when people ask me like what's your dream gig, I mean this thing I'd really love to get involved with is some sort of like sci-fi or fantasy series, like a True Blood or a Battlestar Galactica or anything like within that realm, just where I can sort of be a little bit more whimsical with the writing and have some fun with some fantastical ideas, because I'm a huge fan of that stuff. I'm reading Dan Simmons' Hyperion series. And just absolutely getting super into that, which apparently is going to be made into a TV series coming up. I think Bradley Cooper is involved with that.
Right on.
That would be pretty amazing. So, yeah, that would be something. Actually, another another sort of fakey thing I did one time was when I attended TIFF, I think it was in 2011, they had a talk, and they were talking about the early stages that they were sort of in pre-production on pre-production for creating a filmed version of Neuromancer, William Gibson's cyberpunk novel from 1984 or whatever,
right,
which is hands down my favorite book of all time. And when I heard that, I'm like, I'm going to figure out a way to get in touch with the production team, and I'm going to get them some music. I don't care how it happens. And I knew some friends who snuck me into a Comic-Con, and I actually... And somebody else had worked on Cube, so they gave me a poster that I could get signed. So I met Vincenzo Natali, who was slated at that time to be the director, and I was sort of under the guise of getting him to sign this poster. And I then said, "By the way, I hear you doing the cyber or the Neuromancer thing, and I've written some music inspired by the movie that's not been made." And I gave him the CD, and of course, nothing ever came of it because unfortunately, that's like the movie; it can never be filmed or whatever. It's fallen through since then, but. Yeah, it's always stuff like that, just like what's the craziest thing that I can try and do to get something going here.
Right on. So I know that you took a plunge recently as well you kind of moved out of the hub of Toronto, which I feel has a lot of a lot of stuff going on. I mean, like there's instances as an artist where you get a, like today, or, you know, you get a chat from somebody or you get a text from somebody and it's like a project's on in full force, either like they're on set currently somewhere in a warehouse, or you're able to like grab a Uber downtown to do something else because somebody needs some help with, you know, X. But I feel like that's sort of a terrifying thing for me, knowing in the future I can't ever, well, I don't want to say can't ever, but I likely won't ever be buying a gigantic, lovely multi-million dollar home here. But you know, that'd be great. I mean, that's fine. But if it doesn't happen, I'm going to have to swallow that kind of pill when I get to it and move on outwards. And so you made that plunge as an artist and as somebody so connected to a bunch of communities, and you've moved on to Hamilton. So how has that kind of affected your business and your, you know, all of the stuff that you do?
Well, I think that, you know, over the years that I've been in Toronto, I really have a very solid network set up, and that hasn't changed. And there are things that still bring me to Toronto all the time. Luckily, I don't have that. You know, I don't have that requirement to be physically on a set or to show up for auditions like an actor might,
Right.
or any of that requirement to be in a place at a specific time. A lot of the stuff that I'm doing, you know, the preliminaries, the conversations that I'm having or whatever are going to be hopefully months ahead of the actual production going into post, at which time, you know, I have time to sort of sort out how I'm going to meet the director and do spotting and all the rest of that. So it hasn't really changed anything. And the other thing that made me feel confident about doing this is that most of my work has been really remote anyways. You know, like it's most people prefer sort of doing things at a distance, and it's either all by email or maybe the odd Skype session. And it's really me that initiates, you know, maybe some human contact might be a good thing, you know, to really get to know each other and feel like we're two people in a room and not just like a cybernetic ethereal organism floating off in ephemeral space somewhere.
Yeah.
The only thing, you know, it's like the only thing that's a little bit of a drawback is you're out networking one night and, you know, it's like I turned a pumpkin at midnight because I've got to hop on the last train or the bus to Hamilton,
right?
Unless I want to go sleep at someone's couch or something, which is another option, right? And I'm slowly figuring out sort of different ways of making that work too. But other than that, I mean, Hamilton's an amazing place. It's got an incredible arts community. I mean, and it's just a burgeoning city. I have a feeling that you know, the two centers are going to become much more intertwined in terms of the film production. I mean, a lot of film production already happens here, but I think the indie scene is going to find a lot more reason to come down to Hamilton and even, you know, build up a much more robust scene here as well. So I think in the next 10 years, we're going to see a complete shift in terms of that, or at least a hugely growing scene here.
Yeah, I see that for sure, too. There's a lot of people kind of... there's a exodus, and it will continue for sure, and that's really exciting. Yeah. I think there's nothing more exciting than you know, and I mean, Hamilton's developed its own culture, but like for there to be new possibilities, and especially in the art scene, because it just like it's a boundless thing that, you know, morphs and changes into these awesome sort of chasms where people hang out and create, which is so cool to me. So that's really awesome that you're a part of that whole exodus.
Yeah.
We'll all come join you one day.
And I mean, there's so many 416ers out here now, right? Like, it's almost like I feel most of my network is made of people that are either recently transplanted or have been here for a while, but they're basically Torontonians, you know? Like, that's a lot of the arts thing is like that. But it's just a very different vibe out here and a very different... you know, I remember when I moved to Toronto in 99, and I remember driving in from the 401 or the 427 down to downtown and just looking at everything, and especially when you get into downtown, like on Bay Street, and trying to imagine myself as a person who was like comfortable with this city and felt like I was a part of it. And it just had this weird kind of like, I had this feeling like everything that was cool and was happening somewhere else, and it was super beyond my reach. Like it was, like I had this weird kind of vision of like amazing things happening in these huge towers and all far away from me and totally beyond my imagining, right? And you know, eventually you get sort of used to what Toronto is, and you realize everyone's really open and willing to work together and just super friendly and collaborative and wonderful.
Yeah.
But there is still that kind of like, there's a harder edge to Toronto, right? Whereas in Hamilton, there's a feeling of potential. I remember when I first when we started looking here for our home, and actually we weren't even planning to move. We just came out to sort of do a scouting session, and remember it was one of the first times I'd come to Hamilton, and rounding the corner on the 403 going, this place looks awesome. Like, I think I've been sold a false bill of goods here, because people always talk about how like dirty and gross and industrial it is. I'm like, this place is great. Like, it's really cool. It's got a neat vibe, and it reminds me. And everyone that I know that sort of comes to Hamilton's like, it reminds me of like Montreal. It reminds me of Moose Jaw. It reminds me of Vancouver. It reminds me of this. Like, it reminds everyone of a different city, right? But yeah, I remember driving down Barton Street, and it's like Barton used to be like the hopping place in the 1920s, like just the place. And you can see the relics of that, and a lot of it's boarded up and shut down, and it's really struggling sort of with this post kind of depression, post 2008 crash kind of thing still, and the whole move from steel to something else. But man, I don't know what it is. You just feel like, man, this is going to be amazing one day. Like, there's so much potential here.
Right on, yeah. I think it'll be a great place. And
it is already a great place, for sure.
For sure. It's getting there, and it'll be cool to see what happens in the next 10 years for it. So currently, what are you working on at the moment?
Right now, I've just wrapped on a bunch of really cool short films. One of them called Ink, which is a new filmmaker that I hadn't worked with before, Ashley Wessel. Whenever I run into someone who has like a German name, I want to pronounce it properly, but then I'm like, that's going to sound weird to everyone else, and probably no one says that. And no one calls an Ashley Wessel. Everyone's like, who's that? Oh, you mean Ashley Wessel? Right? Okay. Really cool little short called Ink, which I'm really excited for her to release, because it's just visually stunning. Right, and that was a lot of fun to work on, because it was very, very eerie sound design, and lots of sort of just a very surrealist kind of thing. So a couple of things like that. I've got what's called kind of a movie of the week coming up later in the summer. And in the meantime, I'm slowly working away at this feature-length documentary, which is at this point called The Golden Krama, which is close to my heart because it's about martial arts, and it's actually a martial arts documentary about Bokatoa, which is the martial art of Cambodia. So it's about a master that's trying to revive that, about his school and his relationship with his students.
Oh, beautiful.
And the whole like healing process that Cambodia has been slowly going through culturally from the Pol Pot regime and the killing fields and all that. Like a really painful history there, and really neat from a Western perspective to see how that just affects people on a day-to-day basis, and sort of how they're living their lives. So that's been a really neat, long-standing project that I'm
that sounds wonderful.
Working away at. Yeah.
Yeah. So people can find you on your website. Is there any other sort of social media that you keep up with, or that people should look at to find these projects when they're coming out, and keep how do people find you?
My website, adrianelliscomposer.com. I'm a very bad Twitterer at Adrian_Ellis.
Well, I'm going to end this here where I'm going to read you a quote, and I want you to tell me what you think about it.
All right.
This is a quote from Cheryl Strayed, and it's she wrote sort of like a book of different quotes and different sort of things to ruminate on. So her quote here that really resonated with me this week was, cultivate an understanding that life is long, that people both change and remain the same, that every last one of us will need to fuck up and be forgiven, that we're all just walking and walking and walking and trying to find our way, that all roads lead eventually to the mountaintop.
Beautiful.
What do you think? What do you think about that?
To me, it speaks to the idea that it's a long game. I think one of the things for me is, and where your expectations are in terms of having a creative career, right? Are you chasing awards and recognition and validation from your peers, or are you purely about the work? And are you interested in just putting one foot in front of the other, and getting stuff done? And again, failing and fucking up, but realizing that that's not really what it is. It's just learning and getting better at stuff, and then always focusing on mastery as you move forward. But not really, when I was 15 and I had my high, goals of becoming a famous rock and roll guy, just to think about that in terms of how I've changed. And I think that goes back to Cheryl's quote as well, where, you're going to change, you're going to be different. What you think are your goals now in your life, what you see your life being 50 years from now, guess what? In 20 years, it's not going to be the same thing.
No way.
Along the way, you'll see that each one of those plateaus or each one of those mountains you thought was going to bring you somewhere is just another view. And if you hang your hat on that and you think that's going to be everything to you, and that where you are in life is going to give you some sort of happiness just because you've gotten there, nah, you're going to miss it, man. It's all about the walking, and it's all about moving forward and learning and being with other human beings and getting as much out of that as you possibly can.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on, Adrian. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. Kick ass. We'll see you sometime soon.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Cheers.
I've had the distinct pleasure of working with Adrian before in the past on one of my films, and his work is truly incomparable. I have seen the moving image be brought more to life by Adrian's work. If you're interested in his musical stylings, check him out at www.adrianelliscomposer.com. Thanks for listening, everyone. Stay loyal, and until next time. A reminder to everyone to please like and comment on iTunes. Those ratings really help us out. You can also find us on SoundCloud, Facebook, and Twitter by looking us up at Faking It Podcast. We also have a guest blog series I want to remind you all about. Share your Faking It experience and be a blogger with us. Add us on Twitter or email through fakingitpodcast@gmail.com.